Brotherhood webinar series. My name is Lauren Nybert, Programs Manager for HFA. Tonight's webinar topic is Hepatitis C, Advocacy and Choices for Therapy. We have 5 terrific speakers tonight presenting on this important and timely topic in the bleeding disorders community. As a reminder, your line will be muted during this call, and we will hold questions for the end unless you need something clarified briefly. Please raise your hand if you would like to speak, or otherwise, please submit a question in the question box. As a reminder, this presentation is not intended to be construed as medical advice or the official opinion or position of HFA, its board, or its staff, or its board of directors. Participants are strongly encouraged to discuss their own medical treatment with their healthcare providers. With that, I will turn the line over to Mark Antell, our moderator this evening. Mark is HFA's Board of Directors, Co-Vice President, and Principal in People with Bleeding Disorders and HCV. Mark?
Thank you very much, Lauren. I wonder if you could bring up the slide that describes the overall scorecard for the evening. Thank you. This presentation can be seen as an update on, or can be looked at as an update on the presentation that we gave in Tampa. Most of the speakers are the same, but we're frankly in much better circumstances than we were back this spring. So the speakers and the speaker flow is pretty much that we'll start off with we'll start off with Stephen Walker, who is co-founder of the Abigail Alliance for Better Access to Developmental Drugs, a very good group of people, very good people that have taken on the problem that drugs are developed too slowly, they're approved too slowly, and often in ways that require tests, unnecessary testing, while people are desperate for drugs. So we'll start off with a general advocacy. Paul Brayshaw, who was past president of HFA, will talk about the actual experience that he and I and John have had as we've tried to push the process of development and approval of HCV drugs for people with bleeding disorders. There's some good lessons there. Then we'll narrow down to talking about what are the options right now, and that's a wonderful story. And that'll be John Reed, and I think that John will as well talk about what's on the clearly observable horizon. We can really see it coming the way you see a front coming in Oklahoma, right, John? A weather front. And then finally, Chris Walsh, who is the principal, Dr. Walsh is the principal investigator on a trial which is recruiting right now, which involves 2 far improved drugs, far better. It's a far better therapy than what we've been used to all these years. Before each of the patient speakers completes their presentation, I'd hope that they'd say a few words about what got them into the therapy that they're in. And I'll kick that off saying that I'm currently on week 9 of 12 on a combination of Sofosbuvir and Ledipasvir. I had been hoping to get into a clinical trial with the clinical trial that Dr. Walsh is the PI on, and was expecting to, but I had an acute attack of hepatitis and had bleeding varices, and because my condition was so severe, my liver doctor was able to get Medicare to pay for 2 separate prescriptions, one Sofosbuvir and the other Ledipasvir. As of now, I'm non-detectable. Actually, just 4 weeks out. I don't yet have the 8 weeks out test. Non-detectable virus. Liver enzymes are normal. and with pretty minimal side effects. Some anemia, some platelets are kind of low. The side effects that are observable to me, at any rate, I'm a little bit tired, but I was a little bit tired when I had, pretty extensive viremia. So it hasn't been. I did take the Riba and interferon back 10 years ago, and or about 10 years ago, and this is nothing like that. This is just a tenth, if that. It's just a whole order of magnitude different. So that's what I've got to say, and I was hoping then that Steve could come up to the plate and talk a little bit give you some important news on what it takes to move drugs through FDA to actual availability.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for inviting me to participate in this. The Abigail Alliance is a patient advocacy group, and we have accomplished nothing over the years without the support and help and passion of people who actually have these diseases, who we try to empower to just speak for themselves and be their own advocates, because you are the most powerful advocates. Things have changed a lot in the HCV community since March, and really had to put some thought into what to talk about, because real progress is happening. Do I have control of these slides, or would you?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Okay. Do I? Okay, great. Okay. So sorry about my my inexpert handling of the. Okay. When I last spoke at the HCV conference in Tampa, we knew there were some cures in the pipeline, but they weren't available yet, and now some of them are. So it's really changing the landscape, and listening in our little practice session the other night to the other guys on this call talk about what these drugs are doing is a real uplifting experience for me, because we are going to see a lot of these kinds of major advances coming quickly now, but in the 14 years I've been doing this, to have cures for disease like hepatitis C come along, it didn't happen, and now it's starting to happen. So it's very gratifying. And the point there is that everything is changing. Our knowledge of disease, our ability to craft drugs instead of try to discover them, is changing everything, and it's putting tremendous pressure on a system that was built to regulate failures, a much higher failure rate than success rate. Now we're starting to see that turn around, and we're starting to see many more successes. Eventually we'll see more successes than failures. I'm certain that's coming. But our system needs to change to allow those successes to move forward quickly. And the people who need to do that is the patient community. I have a line in the slide that the patient community is rising up. They really are. And they've had to elbow their way into the system, because while we were welcome as subjects and as patients, and doctors truly cared about us, they didn't care much about our opinions, and the regulators cared even less. So that's changing, and it's changing because of patient advocacy by patients who have these diseases. Get this to. How can I get this to move forward? I'm clicking. There we go. Okay, so my advice to the HCV community, and you've done a wonderful job for yourselves so far as your own advocates, and you have some very effective advocates, some of whom are on this call to speak to you today, that you need to be your own advocates, and you need to let the regulators, the payers, know that you're there. You need to make sure that they know where there are still unmet needs in the community. So one of the things that can happen when we start to see success in a disease is the regulators start to think, okay, we've got this handled. And they start to slow down on follow-on therapies, and maybe there's still a sizable group, or even if there's just a small group of patients left who don't have what they need, they can get lost, and things can slow down, and they can start concentrating on trials more than delivery. And so it's up to the community to make sure that they know you're there and that there's still a need for speed. And it's really up to us to change the system, and we're the ones that drive change in the system. Having a little trouble getting these to move. There we go. So if you want to be an advocate, and you can be an advocate in small ways. You can tell your physician, you can make phone calls, you can send emails, you can tell your congressman that more is needed, that research funding is needed, or that more regulatory flexibility is needed, or that you need to get into a trial that you can't get into. And sometimes those small efforts can make a difference for you, and usually if it makes a difference for you, it's going to make a difference for others. But what we really need is major pressure, and I think that the HCV community now has a unique opportunity based on the success of finding cures for your disease and tolerable cures that happen quickly and that can maybe even be improved more, that you have an opportunity to tell the policymakers at the FDA and tell policymakers in Congress that cures are very valuable and that there's great power, great social power in cures. We need to foster more of these, not just for hepatitis C. You have a lot of brothers and sisters out there, millions, who are waiting for what's happened in your disease to happen in theirs, and they need your help. So when you become an advocate, there's a steep learning curve. To be a real advocate, there's a steep learning curve. You have to learn how the system works. You have to learn that there are a lot of competing interests and many special interests who are pulling on the system. The private sector drug companies, the clinical researchers, the regulators, the venture capitalists all see the system differently than we do as patients. And if we're not out there telling people what we need and how we see the system, quite honestly, it's not that they're bad people, they just don't know. They don't see it from our angle. So we have to tell them. We have to be bold and direct, and we have to say what we mean. We have to be careful not to allow them to mislead us, pardon me, or glad hand us, because sometimes this is really about power and money in some parts of the system, and we have to be as forceful and as sure of ourselves and as persistent as everyone else is. One of the things you find when you become an advocate, and thankfully I think this is changing a little bit because patients are coming into the system now and they're being heard, and people on sort of the other sides of medical progress are learning from patients things that they didn't know they didn't know. And that's an odd statement, but it's really true. They thought they knew what we wanted, and they really had no idea. They thought they knew what our, for example, acceptance of risk was, our perception of benefit was, and they really didn't. They presumed they knew, but they didn't know. And so that's changing. But as you become an advocate, you really have to look at it as an exercise in sort of professional careerism. You have to become an expert, and then you have to play at the level that everybody else plays at. It's very hard work, and what you find out when you do that is that everything you thought you knew about medical research, about trials, about regulation, about why drug companies do what they do, about why physicians think the way they do, was wrong, because we don't understand their perspective any more than they understand ours. So you have to understand their perspective. When you want things to change and you want things to work, you have to try to make it work for everyone, not just for us. It's got to work for them too. For example, if a drug company can't get their drug reimbursed, there not only won't be drug companies trying to develop drugs, there won't be any drugs at all, because that's a critical step in the process. So to say that a drug company is charging too much, maybe they are, but maybe they need to charge quite a bit because it now costs over $1 billion to develop a drug on average. And they're developing other drugs besides the one they just got approved, and they need to pay for that. So I own a business, and I know the reality of the money coming in has to equal the money going out, or the doors close and there is no business. That's the same deal with them. So you need to know all these things, and when you sit down to negotiate on behalf of patients, the passion, the need, your knowledge of the disease needs to come through, but you also need to listen very carefully, and you need to understand where they're coming from, because if it doesn't work for them, it's not going to work for us. So that's a reality about being a good advocate. And I think you have some excellent advocates, by the way, who are very good at doing those things. So one of the things that's happened after many years of patient organizations, including the Abigail Alliance, pressing intelligently but passionately for a better system, for a more responsive system, is with the last User Fee Act renewal we got a couple of years ago, we got some reforms. And one of the reforms is a breakthrough designation. Now, you can read this slide. I don't have to read it for you. But breakthrough does not mean that the FDA has to move quickly. It does not mean that they have to be flexible. That was the intent of Congress, but it wasn't actually written into the enforceable language of the law. But what the breakthrough designation and the intent language that was written into the law and the pressure that's coming from outside the system now did was it turned breakthrough designation into what the FDA calls a development tool that fosters communication, pardon me, and encourages them to be flexible and to move quickly. Now, their acceptance of this, and you know, I've been encouraged to take credit for things like breakthrough, and certainly the Abigail Alliance has been a voice that for change, has proposed a lot of ideas. But when you finally get to something like breakthrough, it only happens through the coming together of a lot of different people recognizing that it's time for change. And while I think we can say that we contributed ideas that have contributed to a lot of things that the FDA is doing now that are better, the reality is the Abigail Alliance isn't the one doing it. It's the drug companies, the physicians, the venture capitalists, the FDA who are actually doing it, and the patients who are enrolling in the trials and talking to the FDA and letting people know what needs to happen. So this has become a team effort. We still have a long way to go, and it takes a long time to change cultures. Change is hard. It takes a long time to get a lot of people who have been doing things in a certain way for what seemed like great reasons for a very long time to start thinking about what they're doing in a different way. And drugs like the ones that are coming out for your disease now that are real cures, cures that are tolerable, cures that are fast, cures that sick people can tolerate so they can get better. This is a huge change in the way we make medical progress. And as I said before, I think it creates a unique opportunity for your community. I mean, all of the pieces are in place. You are a sympathetic group. You don't have these HCV because of poor behavior. You have HCV because you got infusions of blood or contaminated because of your hemophilia. So you have the opportunity to change the way people think by telling them about the value of these cures to you. You need to be aggressive. If you're going to be an advocate, an effective advocate, you need to be aggressive. You need to talk to the people who make the decisions. You can't be shy, and you have to be persistent, get to them, meet with them, talk to them, communicate with them, and tell them what you need from the system. That's really what you have to do. The people with the disease for any development program, for any drug, are by far the best advocates for moving that drug quickly, for moving that drug responsibly, and for getting it to you at the earliest time when you are comfortable with taking it. That's what this is all about. It's not about getting drugs that nobody wants because they're not proven enough yet, or they're not safe enough yet, or they don't work. It's about when we have drugs like you're getting, and it's clear that people are now dying or suffering because they can't have the drug. Those are the drugs where we really need to apply the heavy pressure and to turn the system so that it's not just about the research, it's not just about the process, it becomes more about delivery. And that's really what advocacy is all about. It's not about making it better for the researchers and the drug companies, it's about making it better for us and helping them find ways so that they can reasonably do that. And right now there are a couple of really amazing new real opportunities to not only help yourselves, but to help everyone. One of them is, and this is real, this is something we've never seen before, and trust me, I've been watching Congress very closely for 14 years. The Energy and Commerce Committee under Upton and DeJet, it's the chairman and the ranking Democrat, have started back in May something called the 21st Century Cures Initiative. They're holding hearings like mad. They are holding hearings on every subject they can think of. They are talking to patients and patient groups, physicians, researchers, drug companies, pharma, bio. They're talking to everyone. They're talking to economists, talking to patent experts. And they're going to continue to do that through the end of the year with the goal of writing legislation for the beginning of next year that they, I think, really intend is going to change everything. They're going to try to turn the system. Will they be able to fix everything with this? Probably not. But I encourage all of you to go to this email, cures@mail.house.gov, and send them your thoughts about what you think needs to happen in the HCV space. And don't be shy, just tell them what you think. I would also encourage you that if you really want to talk to them, they're pretty accessible. And you can get them on the phone. Just call the Energy and Commerce Committee and ask for the people that are doing this. I've met them. They're good people and they're accessible. Or your group, maybe the organization, some of the people that are on this call should ask for a sit-down meeting with the staff that are handling this so that you can convey to them what's going on in your disease and what needs to happen going forward. It's real. It's worth it. They're reading those emails, so if you're inclined, please do it. And then the other thing that's happening, and this is in part a result of the user fee legislation, in part because of just tremendous pressure from the patient community on the FDA to let us in. And while I can't go into details because it's not really public, the FDA is now doing that. They are arranging meetings between patients who are going to be affected by a development program, affected by the decisions, and they are arranging meetings with the review teams so that you get to go in there and explain the disease to them, explain your idea of benefit and risk, and actually tell them what you think they should do with respect to developing a drug. What should the clinical trials look like? I mean, is it realistic to expect patients to enroll in a trial that randomizes patients to a placebo? If it isn't, and it usually isn't when you have a really promising drug coming in, go tell them, because they don't really know, and they have to be told by the patient community you don't want that, and you're willing to take a drug that hasn't been tested necessarily against a placebo or against any control arm. And with a drug that has 100% or 95% cure rate, there's really no need for that. So you need to tell them that, because their process is, that's what we do. They need to be told and given permission to not do it. They want to hear, and they are required now to hear about what your perception of benefit is, what your perception of risk is, what your risk tolerance is. They are required to listen to you about what kind of flexibility you want. They want to hear from you about new clinical trial designs. And while they're still not quite accepting that patients should be able to decide how fast the drug gets approved, that's really where it needs to go, because all of this is tied to how soon does it get approved, how soon can I get it into my body and have a chance to eradicate my disease, live longer, be cured. And that's really what it's about. So I've talked for a little longer than I expected to, but don't give up on your advocacy just because you think cures are coming. As good as things are in your community right now, 2 years from now, there are still going to be people with hepatitis C for whom the available therapies either didn't work or aren't quite right. And there's going to be stuff in the pipeline to help them. So if you're one of the many fortunate people who are going to be cured, don't forget the people who you sat next to in March who aren't quite there yet. And let's keep pulling for them. And for that, I'll turn it over.
Paul, go ahead.
Thanks, Mark. And thank you all for joining tonight. I appreciate your time. This is Paul Brayshaw. As you can see from the slide, I was the former or past president of HFA, and have been a part of this people with bleeding disorders and Hep C since it began, trying to get access to some of these drugs that are are curative. But it's been a long time. It was a long time coming. And listening to Steve, it's refreshing to know that we did a lot of things right, but we also had to learn the hard way several times and just keep banging on doors. But that's kind of, you know, we had the motivation. And I can say, in my own experience, the motivation came from wanting to rid the Hep C from my body. I've had enough challenges in my life, and I figured this was the opportunity to get rid of something. And actually, I made that conclusion back in the early 2000s. I'd always been an active or engaged in trying to monitor my liver condition, whether it was through liver enzymes, liver biopsies, or actually attempting therapies. A lot of those, I found out, those are where I learned some of the harshest lessons. You know, the enzymes were always elevated for me, and the biopsy actually missed the first time, and I think they might have taken a little bit of my gallbladder. So they didn't get a good sample, needless to say. And then the failed therapy piece, I failed peg interferon ribavirin after 1 week. So I was kind of left with not many options. This seemed like the only possibility is to pursue advocacy. And what do you know, Mark and I got together to try to do some of this, John as well, to go after a lot of the things that Steve just talked about. And we did that in 2009 when we realized that the only therapies that we really had were peg interferon ribavirin. We knew that they offered miserable side effects, and if you didn't achieve success, then your chances of, you know, if the therapy didn't work for you, you would continue to see your virus present and continue to cause damage. And we heard about a lot of the anecdotal evidence from friends and other people in the bleeding disorders community who had failed and ended up worse off than when they started, with some rapid progression of Hep C symptoms. And we also saw a lot of friends die. So what we tried to do, and then with this people with bleeding disorders and Hep C, was to pursue the advocacy role, bring the FDA in. We found ways to meet with industry stakeholders. We joined different groups that were engaged in the hepatitis fight, not just people with bleeding disorders, but injection drug users and you know, various community-based organizations that had constituents who were also equally in demand of these kinds of therapies. So as part of our effort to, with the people with bleeding disorders and Hep C, we began with a petition to the FDA to help shed some light on the issues we faced, you know, the poor medical options we were experiencing, the risks associated with the biopsy, and some of the things that we felt needed to be considered before we went in for a biopsy, but also having a biopsy. We wanted to remove the requirement that a biopsy was going to exclude us from trials, and we also wanted to speed up the approval for Hep C curative therapies. And we basically achieved all those things. We found through those relationships that we could call on the FDA and be engaged. We actually testified in front of them for prior therapies just to keep the process moving, you know, to try to build on some of the successes. Granted, the drugs weren't ideal. Tolacapavir and Boceprevir had their own problems in combination with peg interferon ribavirin. But we felt like those were the first generation of the direct-acting agents that needed to actually be approved before we could get drugs that we have in the pipeline today. So with that, along with that petition and in our meetings with the companies, we found people that do listen. But like Steve said, we had to kind of push on a lot of doors and really, you know, be actively engaged in a way that described how our issues were different. The fact that we were a group of patients who have been in or institutionalized in care throughout our lives for hemophilia. So the fact that we were adherent to therapy and we were able to maintain drug regimens follow-up, and if we have pill counts, to have the appropriate number of pills, we know how to, I guess, follow the treatment guidelines, if you will. For the most part, I can't make a blanket statement there, but I think that was an argument for us that had resonance, so we could get to the point we're at, which actually, if you haven't heard, we had meetings with Gilead, who actually has two of the therapies that are components of the trial that they're sponsoring. Their Sofosbuvir drug, which was recently FDA approved, as well as their investigational drug, Ledipasvir. Those are the two of the active agents. There's also two other arms in the trial. There's three arms in the trial. Sovaldi, Ledipasvir is for genotype 1s, Sovaldi ribavirin for genotype 2s, and for genotype 3s. This is a trial that has 125 spaces and it's actively recruiting. This is a trial that was the culmination of our efforts, and we knew that these were the drugs that were going to be curative, the first round of drugs that were going to be curative. And Gilead came through. They've been a partner since we first began negotiating with them. They've offered us, I guess they didn't offer us as many seats as we wanted, but pretty much everything else, they've been very supportive of everything we've asked. And I'm happy to say that I actually enrolled in the trial and on June 30th, and 10 days after I enrolled, I had my blood work done, and I was undetectable. 10 days. I got other labs that showed my enzymes have returned to normal. My other, the labs that, I guess some of the other specific, without getting into too much detail, some of the other indicators for disease progression have reversed. So if you're questioning whether or not this therapy is the one, I think it's time to consider your options and discuss these drugs with your doctors. I think the time is now. The longer people wait for a sustained viral response, the additional progression takes place, liver disease progression. And there's no reason that the side effects or others should keep people on the sidelines. There are certain things that need to be considered for drug interactions if there's co-infection with HIV, but for the most part, this experience has been very tolerable. I think that it's amazing how tolerable it is. Can't believe it took us this long. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to share my experience and our experiences, and I look forward to having the ability to respond to questions if anybody has them.
Well, that's terrific, Paul. It feels good. So that covers the advocacy portion of this presentation. The rest will be about where we are in terms of what drugs are available now, and as well something about the clinical trial that is ongoing. John Reed, perhaps you could take it from here.
I can. And thank you, Mark, and thank you, HFA, for this opportunity. I'm going to rip through these things pretty fast. Lauren, do I have control here? Here we go. How do I back up?
Right-click and here I can do it.
Right-click and back up. I got it.
And then go to previous, yeah.
Yeah, we're really good advocates. We just can't run a slideshow. Okay, I'm not getting back to the slide I want to get to.
If you want, Ron can.
Okay, here we go.
Ron can run it for you.
Yeah, there we go. I got it. As of today, the current ASLD, which is the American Society of Liver Disease Specialists, these are their recommendations. For if you have genotypes 1A or 1B, Sovaldi and weight-based ribavirin plus weekly PEG interferon for 12 weeks. That's number one. Number two is Sovaldi, weight-based ribavirin, and Licio for 12 weeks. Also, Licio with weight-based ribavirin and PEG interferon for 12 weeks. Most of us are probably looking for a combination that does not include, especially interferon, and preferably not ribavirin. There has been a lot of off-label use over the past 6 months of Sovaldi and Licio for 12 weeks. The reason that these two drugs are not indicated together at this particular time is that they both gained FDA approval at virtually the same time. I mean, within 7 business days of each other. And the FDA can't approve a therapy to be used with another therapy when it's not already on the market. The science is there, the trials are there. This is the therapy that Mark is currently on right now, and I myself took this for 12 weeks, and I finished up at this time and have cleared hepatitis C. My liver enzymes are all back to normal, and as Mark said, with relatively few side effects. The picture is not as rosy right today for the genotype 2 and 3. Really the only true indication out there for genotype 2 at this time is Sovaldi with ribavirin for 12 weeks. And for genotype 3, it is Sovaldi with ribavirin for 24 weeks, or Sovaldi, ribavirin, and PEG interferon for 12 weeks. And the results of those two therapies on the genotype 3, when you go from the 24-week to the 12-week, the success rate drops pretty dramatically on genotype 3. So that's where we are today as far as on July the 24th or whatever it is. And as you can see, we're looking at all of these therapies. We're really only looking at 4 drugs. We're looking at Sovaldi, Licio, ribavirin, and PEG interferon. And I'd like to just quickly run through some things that you can probably expect to, wow, I'm just trigger happy here. I highlighted a couple of 3 things on Sovaldi that you can pretty much expect to have happen to you. It's going to be different, you know, your mileage may vary, but anything that has a 30% or more listing of potential side effects is more than, I mean, that's more than likely going to happen to you. I mean, and as you can see, fatigue is listed at almost 60%, nausea is a little over 30%, headaches are a little over 30%, and the itching is approaching 30%. So those are certainly things that you need to look. I can tell you from a personal experience, I certainly had the fatigue. I did have a few dull headaches, and my red count did decrease the entire time that I was on therapy. Drug interactions. If you're going to be on Sovaldi, and I wanted to mention a couple of things. If you're on any kind of TB drug, rifampin, isoniazid, those are basically contraindicated with this drug, and they would have to really closely examine your dose with that. And also and I know we have a lot of amateur herbalists in our community. St. John's wort has the same interaction with Sovaldi that rifampin or isoniazid does. These decrease the effectiveness of Sovaldi by a huge percentage. I mean, almost enough to make it non-effective. These things are running about $1,000 a pill right today, and I would think that you'd want to get the most bang for your buck. So if you're on St. John's wort, you're considering this kind of therapy, you need to think about something else. There's some things there's some stomach meds like Donatol, almost all the anticonvulsants, there's a few of the pain meds and some of the blood pressure medications that fall into the moderate category of drug interactions with Sovaldi. This is not an exhaustive list, but if you're taking something that falls into these categories, you need to be completely honest with your physician, and Dr. Walsh can bear me out on this. You need to be completely honest with your physician about everything that you're taking, even those over-the-counter patent medicines that we don't think about reporting to our physician. Alicio, I can certainly testify rashes and photosensitivity. I didn't have the rash, and I'm fairly dark complected, never sunburned, and I was out in the sun for 4 hours out on a boat one day and blistered. I mean, so that's a real thing. Nausea, muscle pain, and shortness of breath. I had a little bit of the shortness of breath. I did not have any of those other two side effects. The shortness of breath was an aggravation. It wasn't serious. The sun sensitivity is the real deal. You really need to be cautious about being in the sun if you're going to be on Alicio. Drug interactions. This is where most of the HIV drug interactions come into play. If you're on most of the what we call NNRTIs, which is non-nucleotide reverse transcriptase inhibitors for the long word, and you wonder why people in the medical field use so many acronyms. Sustava and Viramune are contraindicated with Alicio. There are quite a few of the PIs, the protease inhibitors, that are contraindicated with Alicio, Kaletra being one of them, Viracep being another, Inverase being another. Lots of therapies include what we call HIV boosters, which would be like Norvir or Stribild, and those interfere with Alicio. If you're going to be on any kind of antibiotic therapy during the 12 weeks that you're on Alicio, you need to be sure and check with your doctor or your pharmacist about that, because there's really just too many of those to mention. Anticonvulsant therapies if you have epilepsy. Dexamethasone, which we wouldn't think about, but that's in almost every over-the-counter cough syrup. So here's St. John's wort again, milk thistles, and all of the antifungals just as a class of drugs interfere with Alicio, and a couple of the stomach meds, such as Donatol and Propulsive. This drug has what's considered to be 65 major drug interactions and 56 moderate drug interactions. And I need to emphasize again that if you're going to be on Sovaldi or Alicio, you need to be honest with your health professionals. You really need to take a full list of all of the medicines that you take, routine and occasional, and let your physician or pharmacist run those things through the programs that we run them through to make sure that your regimen is going to be compatible with the other medicines that you're taking. I'm going to very quickly go through Reba. There's still a lot of people on it. This has been around for a long time. Most of the people in the hepatitis C community are very well aware of most of the side effects that were attributed to ribavirin. These are the most common ones, and I'm just going to run through these really quick. And some more, and some more. These are the less common side effects. You can have a copy of this slide presentation. You just need to contact HFA about that, and more side effects of Reba. Some of the side effects of ribavirin that occurred do not need medical attention. But there are side effects that you can have while you're on ribavirin, that, especially while your body adjusts to taking that medicine, that there's some things that your healthcare professionals may be able to tell you that will help you prevent or reduce some of those side effects. So be sure, if you're taking ribavirin for any kind of therapy, if that's included in your therapy, and you have something going on that you did not have previously to starting on that therapy, just check in with your doctor, and tell them what you've got going on, because there's some real common sense things that you can do to get rid of a few of these, not all, certainly not all of these. These are more side effects and more. Ribavirin, as far as drug interactions is concerned, there are some really serious drug interactions with ribavirin. Most of those involve anti-rejection drugs and cancer drugs. And certainly, if you're on an anti-rejection drug or if you're on a cancer drug, and ribavirin is part of your medical therapy, you're going to have a whole team of physicians that are going to be involved in this. If you're on didanazine, you probably just don't need to be on didanazine if you're taking ribavirin. There's a laundry list of HIV meds that you can't be on, and quite a few other drugs. This is another one of those drugs that you really need to just check with your healthcare professional and have them go through your drug regimen before you start on this therapy. Interferon, I'm not going to go into this. This is really well publicized. Just to multiply everything I said about ribavirin by about 4. We could be here the rest of the evening and night talking about the side effects and drug interactions of interferon. I want to talk a little bit, Mark wanted me to talk a little bit about what's coming up by year-end 2014, or what we anticipate coming up by the ION 1, 2, and 3 trial, which is the trial that Paul is on, that Paul mentioned that he is on, is a 1 pill a day, 1 dose a day of Sofosbuvir and Ledipasvir. Dr. Walsh is the principal investigator of the hemophilia arm of that study, and he can probably talk a little bit more about that. This has shown very favorable test results in the early trials and everything that's published to date on genotype 1A and 1B. In the high 90 percentile with the low side effect profile. I know personally a couple of guys that have cleared within the first 2 weeks of taking this therapy. It's pretty amazing. When you start talking about type 2 and type 3, then you have a drastic drop-off on this therapy right here as far as the percentages. The trial size was 120. I'm not sure about the specific number. I think there were 12 centers across, I put 10 there, but I think there was actually 12 centers across the United States, and the trial size was 120. I'm not sure where we are. I know they're still enrolling. Most projections, whether it's economic or medical, see this combination on the market before year end, and Gilead has filed for breakthrough therapy status on this drug. If I can get that to go.
Oh, John, could I interrupt for just a moment?
Sure.
Okay, we're running clearly a little long. We will have.
You have your key?
Yeah, we do have this line for a while, so that won't be a problem for those of you who can stick around. Let's plan to continue at least until 15 minutes after the hour, an additional 15 minutes.
Okay, I'll be less than 2 minutes, or less than 5 minutes anyway, finishing. I might tell you, I do want to tell you about Sapphire 1 and 2, which is a phase 3 trial of this is the AbbVie trial. It's expected to hit the market by year end, according to the company press releases on that. This has been a very, very successful combination. I can't get these slides to move for me. There we go. The Turquoise 2 is about the same as the Sapphire, except it's going, the Sapphire trial has the therapy at 24 weeks, and this trial has it at 12 weeks. If I could get this thing to go. Whoop. Well, good grief.
Okay, John, I can move back.
Okay, move back one more. I can tell you, since I'm on this slide, oh, there we go. Ledipasvir is certainly one of the most exciting things that we've had coming down the pike in a long time. This is the drug, if you'll remember, that Mark and Paul and I was talking to everybody that had one of its components, the Sovaldi component, was pulled from the trial. This has been, gosh, a year and a half ago. This had the most favorable results in combination with Sovaldi, certainly at the time of any therapy, by far, of any therapy that was out there, and it was pan-hepatic. It could be used in all 6 genotypes of hepatitis. This is currently back in trial, and they have filed for breakthrough therapy status on the Sofosbuvir, the Ledipasvir-Sofosbuvir combination. They also have their own drug. Gilead has GS5816, which will also be pan-hepatic. It'll probably be out early 2015. They've asked for breakthrough designation on this drug because of the genotypes 2 and 3. There's also another combination that's actually on the market in a couple of other countries of the Ledipasvir with, and I'm not sure how you pronounce this, Sinai, I guess, and it's shown great results across the board and it's actually been approved. Merck's currently in trial with a 2-drug combination that's very, very comparable to what the Sovaldi-Alicio combination is in. They're looking for some hemophilia participants, and Mark and Paul and I have been involved in conversation with that. I do need to emphasize that this is my own personal opinion, and I'm going to turn this thing over to Dr. Walsh, and I'm sorry if I've ran too long.
Well, it was a great presentation. I think that many people really wanted to hear that, so no apologies necessary.
I might go back one slide,
yep,
if you don't mind, and just show. Now, just go on to Dr. Walsh. We'll come back later on to that. These are great resources. You can get them.
Chris?
Dr. Walsh, you'll just need to unmute yourself on the actual taskbar.
How about now?
Perfect.
Loud and clear, Dr. Walsh. Loud and clear.
Thank you. All right. So I'll briefly discuss a current clinical trial that's going on, and basically this is due to the efforts of Mark and Paul. I think they should be given major kudos for persevering with this particular drug company, Gilead, who is facilitating a trial for hemophilia treatment. As you can see on this slide, there's 13 centers involved. 10 are active. I believe 57 people. Patients have been screened. 35 have already undergone therapy. I can't give you any data on them, but you've heard from Paul. Most of what I'm hearing unofficially is identical to what Paul's telling you, that they go on this trial and within a matter of a short period of time, the virus is cleared. They have some side effects which would be considered minimal, at least in comparison to other therapies they've taken. And once they're off the drug, they feel back to normal. The next slide, if you could switch to the next slide, please. Is a brief, it's just simple study design. It's 2 drugs, Sofosbuvir and Ledipasvir, for in combination. It's a pill you take for 3 months every day. Originally, the trial was to be divided, as shown here, between genotype 1 and 4. There were 75 patients. However, we found that most of genotype 2 and 3, at least at many of at our center and others, have been cleared of the virus using interferon, which is rather remarkable. It's far less prevalent, yet seem to be more sensitive to the interferon treatment. So because of the fact these numbers have changed now, the company will allow far more patients with genotype 1 to be enlisted in this trial, in which there's 125. The next slide is the inclusion criteria for those who are still listening. And this is a unique study because it's designed for any patient, an adult patient who has hemophilia of Walsh or any bleeding disorder where they would have contracted hepatitis via transmission of a blood product. The genotypes of HCV are shown, and you could have been already a new patient, naive, meaning you've never been treated before, or you've experienced some treatment in the past. They will accept up to 40% of patients who have what are called compensated cirrhosis. There's no biopsy required in this study. You can use a variety of different techniques, blood tests, ultrasound, CAT scan, but no biopsy is required, nor do we want to do that. And that patients who have just HCV or HCV and HIV are clearly to be enrolled. There are exclusions that I'm not going to go into because of time. And so for me, as a physician, I think this is another point where activist patients have taken the lead in terms of moving the ball on getting trials. I was told by Gilead, though, that at least in terms of their previous trials, the other trials that they've done, they always would have, there was never an exclusion for a hemophilia or bleeding disorder patient, which I believe was sort of rumored throughout the meetings and whatever. According to them, patients with bleeding disorders were never excluded. And I think this points to the fact also is that all those trials, in fact, were dominated by principal investigators who are infectious disease or liver doctors and not hematologists. So I think lightning is struck in a bottle where the necessary elements required for a trial for our specific patient group, with hemophilia and bleeding disorders. And this is the first of its kind that I'm aware of. So I'm very proud to be a part of it, as well as the fact that as a treating physician, to cure somebody is always the uber ultimate goal of any physician, and in fact, that's what you're looking at. So my ardent request for any patient or family member listening to this is that please avail yourself to discuss the current treatments with your physician for hepatitis, and more importantly, if I believe these slides will be available if you're located near one of these participating centers, please avail yourself to contact them and discuss the possibility of participating in this trial, or if not this, in future trials, which undoubtedly we will have across the country. So with that, I send it back to you, Mark.
Gosh, it's been a pleasure working with you, Dr. Walsh. So what is the mechanism for asking questions, Lauren? And what kind of time frame can you give us for that?
I mean, if folks are comfortable staying on the line, we can stay on for another 15 minutes or so. We have several questions already in the box, so I'm going to go ahead and read those off. So go ahead and submit questions to the question box if you're listening. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and I can unmute just your line. But first, we can kind of get through some of these questions. So the first question is, Does treatment for hepatitis C help to cure cirrhosis?
That's a great question, and the answer is we don't know. We honestly don't know. This is something, again, you can talk to a liver specialist, but the thinking is as follows. It takes decades, simply decades, 20, 30, 40 years, for the virus to be in place for cirrhosis to occur. Once you clear the virus, the mechanism for the maintenance of that cirrhosis, which is a fibrosis, it's a particular inflammatory response, should be gone. The question is, how long does it take for this to resolve? And the data on that is really not there, as far as I'm aware. So, therefore, patients who are on this therapy and clear the virus, and in my view, my opinion would be that they have to be followed at least yearly, similar to an annual hemophilia comp visit, just to see how they're doing in terms of their liver function. As you've heard already, the liver enzyme tests clear rather dramatically, but those tests, quite frankly, have never been a very great marker for fibrosis. There are plenty of tests that can be done to look for fibrosis that are not invasive, that don't require a biopsy. FibroScan is basically an ultrasound of your liver, and that correlates to what a biopsy would show. There's another fiber test. It's a blood test that is now FDA approved. Both these tests are approved and can be used as surrogates to look for cirrhosis. So once the virus is gone, presumably the nidus for the maintenance and continuation of cirrhosis should be removed. How long it will take for the cirrhosis to resolve, or to resolve to what degree, at least in my mind, is a question, and reflects the fact that patients will always have to be followed as well. I have a question I'd like to interject to my colleagues who are talking, especially those who have taken the drugs, is that what was your experience about bleeding rates during taking the particular drugs that you did while you're on it, or after you finished, or especially while you were on it? Did you see any changes in terms of being more or less susceptible for bleeding, requiring more or less factor, et cetera?
I did not.
This is Paul. I did not either.
Well, my platelets are pretty low, but I'm not seeing any bleeding.
Great.
And yeah, that actually was one of the critical reasons why justifications for this clinical trial was that we wanted to confirm, unlike, say, Insuvac, where there is a syndrome of unusual bleeding that happens in the hemophilia population. Well, you just, yeah.
So whoever asked that question is very prescient. That's very important. The other thing is that, at least from what Gilead tells me from all the trials they've done, all the patients that they've been on this combination drug regimen have all cleared their virus. Okay? What we don't know what is the relapse rate. At a point down the road, after the drug is finished, at what percent of patients in which the virus then comes back? They're telling me that this relapse rate is extremely low, but that's something else that has to be followed as well. So getting on a study and taking a drug for X period of time is great. The virus is cleared, and everything hopefully will get better. But again, this is still a study, and one wants to know, if you did have cirrhosis, what happens to you down the line, and also what's the possibility that you will relapse as well. So, at least in my mind, those are two major questions. In addition to those folks who are infected with HIV as well, we know that the combination of HIV and hepatitis C is far more fulminant in terms of liver disease, has greater risk for cirrhosis and liver tumors. And so for those patients, even more importantly, they have to be followed while they're taking their medications for HIV as well.
Okay, we have another. Yes, we have another question. 47-year-old severe hemophiliac, co-infected genotype 2, supposed to start hepatitis C 12-week trial of SOS and ribavirin next week. Do you have the percentages of people in the condition who successfully became hepatitis C, I'm assuming cleared, is the additional word there?
The data that, I'll go ahead, the data that's published with genotype 2 with Sofosbuvir and Ribavirin, when you take it for, I believe, 6 months, is upwards in the 80 plus percentile. It's not as good, quite frankly, as the combination of Sofosbuvir and Ledipasvir, but it's still quite good. And the only downside with that is the use again of ribavirin, which has as its major side effect, as John very nicely showed, is anemia and your blood count. So the results are still, I mean, any person who went to Vegas and said, here, you have an 80% chance that you're going to win the jackpot. I don't know anybody that I wouldn't say to go ahead and do it. Just be aware, again, with the side effects, and I mean, it's not 100%, but it's clearly very, very good. If one wants, you know, we'll just see. This is a trial in hemophilia patients. It should be no different than patients who don't have hemophilia. And so the expectation again is that it should work. Statistically, you have 8 to 9 times out of 10 this drug is going to kill the virus.
And I might add, I was thinking to talk about the things, the results that were released in April. I mean, the percentages went up pretty remarkable from 12 weeks to 24 weeks. I mean, I don't remember what the exact, but I mean, it was like over 90.
You know, it's almost, it went from about 50, 60% up to about 80, mid 80%, approaching 90%.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one has to take this regimen for 6 months.
Right.
So we have another question. What is Medicare authorizing at this time?
That I can probably, that there is no standard answer for that. Most of the people that are on Medicare for their oral medications, you're on a Part D, what's called a Part D as in dog plan. And there are literally tens of thousands of those plans. Just in the state of Oklahoma, we have 1,000 different Part D plans just here in the state of Oklahoma. And you go to the more populous states and you're going to multiply that number by, you know, tenfold or more. So there is no standard. There is no standard for Medicare at this time.
Yeah. I'm sure it varies from state to state and plan to plan, and one has to just find out. You have to call your insurer and find out what they're doing. So again, this was one of the reasons why we're doing this study, and we actually actively tried to expand it to a larger number of patients. But there are other studies, as John mentioned, that are in the either ready to start or will start in the future, where it doesn't matter what plan you have, but I would suggest that you talk to your insurer to find out what they're covering and what they're not.
But doesn't,
go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, doesn't Part B give you additional coverage without the B as in boy?
Not for oral drugs.
Oh, thank you.
They do cover factor, but Part B doesn't cover very many drugs at all. But
Right.
But no, I can't think of any oral drugs that they cover. I might add, when I went to my insurance company, I had to get prior approval for mine. When my physician and I and the staff there were putting the paperwork together to submit to them, the NIH had a really, really good study that they did, comprehensive study that they did back in March or April of this year, that compared the costs of, and they use Sovaldi and Alicio as their target, which is about $160,000 for a 12-week therapy. But it was actually cheaper for them to pay the $160,000 than it was to allow somebody to go untreated. And that's not an industry-sponsored study. That's the National Institute of Health study. So I would suggest, if you're planning on taking these drugs, when you go in for the prior authorization process, that's good information to lay in front of them.
This is Steve. I have a question. As an advocate, I'm always thinking about the unmet need. And we're already seeing, even though these drugs are amazing, and a lot of people are being cleared, there's a percentage, at least in some genotypes, in fact in all genotypes it looks like, that aren't being cleared through their first regimen. And there are going to be some relapses, hopefully few, but some. Is there discussions already underway about what to do about the people that aren't cured? Can you retreat? Do you go to a different regimen? They're thinking about trials to figure out what to do for the people who aren't cleared the first time through and the people who relapse. Never too soon to start thinking about those things.
Yes is the short answer.
I think the audience needs to know that there are just a lot of drug companies moving in this field, and they're all trying to top each other. You went from interferon-based that basically used 48 weeks, nearly a year to treat people. We're down to here now 3 months. There are other proposed trials that are down to a month or even less, to a week or two. So they're all vying for space in this field, and they're all trying to develop drugs that either, as was already mentioned, for those. And I'm just guessing the relapse rate is going to be very low, like 2-4% at top for those patients, as well as just untreated patients. Just if you only have to take drugs for a week or 2 weeks versus 3 months, that's where this is all headed. This is going to be a very competitive field with Gilead or this Sovaldi, Sofosbuvir is clearly the front runner right now, because this drug works terrifically, especially in combination with other drugs. think there are going to be major changes in these drug protocols within clearly 6 months to a year. It's going to change dramatically.
All right. Does anyone have any final questions?
I'd like to make a comment about that Dr. Walsh, or I'd like to repeat something Dr. Walsh said in our practice session. He asked Paul and Mark and I, had we ever been involved with any kind of drug trial or in any aspect in our entire lives that we got cured of. We actually got cured. And I said, no, absolutely not. So this is a fantastic time in the hepatitis C world. And if you're not on therapy, I would strongly encourage you to seek out therapy, or be at least moving in that direction.
Okay.
That's a terrific.
Yeah, I think it's true. I would hope, I would hope in another 2 to 3 years that the hemophilia community does not see hepatitis anymore.
Let's make that a goal.
Yes.
Yeah. That should be the goal.
Someone has asked if a recording of this webinar will be available, and the answer is yes. This is being recorded right now, and the recording will be on HFA's YouTube channel. I will send out an email after this to all the attendees in the next day or so with the link, but the recording will probably be up by Monday. So I'll send you that out when it's available, and you can take a look at it.
Thanks, Lauren. And a deep thanks to HFA. That's been along for a long time in this effort.
This would have never happened without HFA, and I certainly need to voice my appreciation for their support.
Well, thank you all for being on the webinar tonight and sharing with us. You guys have any final thoughts? All right. Well, if anybody has any questions, you can email hfaprograms@hemophiliafed.org, and I will direct them to any of the speakers that you heard tonight. So feel free to send us a message. So thanks, everyone, for being on the webinar, and have a great night.
Good evening.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.